Good afternoon. Today we're talking about effectual innovation and its place within the organization and within maybe the portfolio of approaches within organizations. Innovation is the means by which organizations remain relevant within their environments. So the faster the environment is changing, the faster the organization needs to change, and the faster its core operations need to change. So within organizations, we've these two engines. We've the operational engine, we've the innovation engine. The operational engine is about doing the things today that deliver value today, or at least in the short term. The innovation engine, on the other hand, is about doing the things today that deliver value into the future. There's a very neat way of explaining it, which says the operational value is about doing those things that pay the salaries. The innovation engine is about doing those things that will pay the pensions. So they're very different in time frame, the way they look at things. And I suppose the differences in mindset don't change or don't differ there. The both mindsets have a very different way of looking at risk and reward. In the operational engine, we generally accept lower reward in return for lower risk. We do those things that we already know how to do, but maybe we improve them, but the returns are quite low. On the other hand, with the innovation mindset, it's about accepting higher risk in return for higher rewards. We tend to do those things that we don't know as much about in return for higher reward. And I think those two aspects are very, very important in also understanding the different types of innovation. Generally, organizations that are more sensitive to risk tend to do and do more of incremental and continuous innovation. Those organizations that are more accepting of higher risk may be more willing to do more radical innovation. So when we look at the organization, then in the center, we can see its core operations. We can then see maybe a layer outside that, continuous innovation, and probably the widest circle out from that core is about radical innovation. As we move out from the core, the risk increases, the potential reward increases. And it's very interesting when you go into organizations and you stand within that core operation and you look out. Some organizations will look out and literally see, I suppose, the swamp of innovation outside, and they just see the risks of getting things wrong. Others look out from the core and they see the reward, they see the potential oasis of opportunity. So therefore, the mindsets can be very different. One really see the challenges, the other sees the opportunities. And I think, again, that explains very much the fact that in some organizations, we're far less likely to see innovation. And if there is innovation, we're far more likely to see a certain type of innovation, for example, continuous innovation in those organizations that are more averse to risk. In other organizations, we might see a higher percentage of radical innovation where they're more accepting of risk. So when we profile different types of organizations, roughly we probably have about 1/3 of organizations that are very much focused on core operations, and maybe their leaders see little value in innovation. They just don't get that innovation. Maybe another third of organizations are very much focused on maybe safe innovation, doing less risky innovation. And it's only another third of them that are more likely to push beyond that safe innovation. And in fact, when we look at surveys, the surveys, for example, show that 66 or over 60% of organizations see innovation as a top 2 priority. Okay, there's nearly an equal number of organizations that see their organization struggling with innovation. So even when we have this ambition to innovate, very often we're unable to execute on it. And we've previously referred to that as the I suppose the intent execution gap. Many of us, even when we have that ambition, we really struggle to innovate. So when we look at organizations, and not just organizations, actually individuals are no different, is that we are creatures of habit. We tend to develop patterns of behavior, and we then keep on applying those patterns of behavior, even in situations in which they may be less effective. And we see that when it comes to innovation, we have a natural inclination towards adopting patterns of behavior that are most suited to business as usual, the operational engine. And we see this, for example, in a bias towards process, where I suppose a lot of our activities are overhead required for supporting a process. That process is there to promote efficiency and rule out maybe mistakes. And this is very much akin to the, as I said, the operational engine, or at best, or at worst, incremental innovation. Okay, we tend to use our existing knowledge, our existing skills, our existing behaviors to improve what we already do, and maybe what we already produce, by maybe extending certain products, extending certain services. But we're very unlikely to come up with new ideas, new products, new services. On the other hand, and this, I suppose, means that we're very much closer to this low risk, low reward. And some people would argue we're probably in the 10% type space, 10% return. So how about all that rest of the innovation space, where there's far more radical disruption? How do we get to the 10x type in innovation? So the type of innovation that we're likely to come up with when we have a 10% mindset versus a 10x mindset is very, very different. So even if someone challenges us to improve something by 10%, we're more likely to change what's already there, to tweak it, to modify it, to extend it. On the other hand, if someone really challenges us to create a 10% impact, then we're very likely to move away from what's already there and to come up with new ideas. And there's a marked discrepancy between 10x thinking and 10% thinking. So when it comes to innovation, what does 10x innovation look like? And this is really the challenge that I suppose we posed, and that others have posed, in terms of coming up with new approaches to innovation. And effectual innovation is one of those approaches. It's been born out of research, it's born out of practice. It has been looking at how people, how entities successfully create successful new ventures, successful new products, new services. And it's very much focused on that 10x. So to give credit to some of those that I suppose were instigators of this effectual reasoning and effectuation, as it's called, one being Sarah Sarasvati, who would have examined how entrepreneurs, and innovators create these successful initiatives, and would have identified certain characteristics that mark those out compared to less successful cohorts. And what we'll do is we'll just again briefly explain what effectuation is, what effectual reasoning is, before we talk about what effectual innovation is. So at the core of effectual innovation are the concepts of effectuation and effectual reasoning. So these concepts are based on the idea of creating a future based on the assets we have. So it's not about coming up with an ideal future and then hunting for the assets required to deliver that. It's about starting with the assets and trying to figure out what's the best possible future we can create with these assets. Now, that concept of effectual reasoning, a way of thinking, is absolutely critical to bridging this gap between intent and execution. The bigger the intent, the more likely there is to be a gap, and that gap gives rise to inertia. We're constantly waiting on the correct assets to be able to generate this hard to achieve, possibly impossible future. Okay, the longer the gap, the more we lose trust, the more we lose confidence in this future, the planned future. On the other hand, effectual innovation is about getting going today. It's about looking at the assets we have today and taking the first steps based on those assets towards a better future. This is very important because it gets us going. By getting going, we build momentum. By building momentum, we build trust, we build confidence, and we then snowball where we are more likely to commit even more to that initiative. Very often, I use the mantra, we design big, we start small, we move fast. And really what that means is we still have this aspiration of the future. So starting big, but we also have this idea that we have only certain assets available and we start with those. So we start small. But it's based then on building movement, building momentum, and we move fast. So design big, start small, move fast. Okay, so I suppose then if we look at the principles of effectual innovation, I think they are, again, important to point out. And really, when it comes to effectual innovation or 10x innovation, as I sometimes refer to it, it isn't like the 10% innovation. There are incremental innovation, that continuous innovation. It's not process biased. If anything, it's engagement biased, it's trust biased, it's learning biased. So it's about engaging in order to build trust and to learn early. So the principles and the key principles of effectual innovation are there's a number of them, and we'll call them out. The first one is this idea that the future is not preordained. It's not laid out in front of us and it's preordained for us. It's based on the mindset that says the future is something we can design together. So it's about figuring out what that desired future might be, and the desired future is not the same as the default future. The default future is the future that we ourselves, our organizations, our customers, our communities, our societies are sleepwalking themselves towards if we continue doing the things we are currently doing. So effectual innovation is about instigating and being catalyst for these discussions so that we can figure out what are the designed futures? What are the futures that, for example, our employees, our customers desire? So we don't impose those futures on our employees, our customers, but we allow and listen to their conversations that provide us with some guidance as towards the types of futures they want. Our role then as innovators is, and as an organization, is can we provide the means to, for example, these customers to build this future? And we use the concept of actualization a lot here. It isn't just about giving products and services to customers that allow them to do something, but it's about giving to our customers so that they can become something. So I think this is a major anchor point for effectual innovation. It is about the idea that we and our stakeholders can design these futures. We as an organization can be a really critical stakeholder to our customers in allowing them to create those futures. And we call this principle pilot in the plane. We are the pilot. Our stakeholders are the pilot in our futures. Okay, so a second principle then is based on the idea, what is our strategy, our strategies as an organization towards supporting, enabling our stakeholders to achieve this future. And at its core, we need to figure out what the innovation landing strip is here. We need to make sure that innovation and the organization sees an aspiration and an important aspiration for innovation. We need to make sure that the organization is serious about supporting that aspiration through creating innovation capabilities. And we need to be sure that the organization is serious about supporting the application of those capabilities. So as an organization, we need to ensure there is a landing strip for innovation within our corporate strategy. If there isn't, there's a very high chance that any effort we put into innovation, we being employees or leaders within the organization, will be ignored or just won't gather traction because it doesn't add to this corporate strategy. Another principle is that we start with the assets that we already have. We identify what those assets are. We try and figure out what is it that we can do with those assets. Now, we also have another principle, which is around the fabric of innovation within the organization. We know if we can grow the fabric of innovation, let's say through partnering or growing a wider innovation ecosystem that is beyond the boundaries of the innovation, then we've access to more assets. So we can go even further again. And I suppose tied in with that then is this idea that we always look at the, I suppose, the risk side. So it isn't that effectual innovation and people that practice effectual innovation ignore risk. If anything, it's the opposite, but we control risk. The way we do that is we start small. Okay, and sometimes we call those projects the big easies. You know, we start with small undertakings. So we divide the overall maybe strategy down into elements, and those elements down into tasks, and we, I suppose, time box those tasks, and we get commitment of assets towards those. And at the start, the focus really is about getting going and building that momentum I spoke about earlier, so that we can build trust, we can build confidence. So then we start to layer task on top of task, all towards moving towards that larger strategy. Also, I suppose when it comes to effectual innovation, we have also the concept that, again, it's not process biased, but we have a sense of how we go about it. And the way we go about it is very much about collaborating with others, maybe even co-creating. Again, that collaborative co-creation reduces the risk. So instead of building for someone, ideally we try and build with them. Again, as I say, reducing the risk and also the likelihood of reward at the end. So I think these are just some of the principles that are absolutely critical to effectual innovation, and that also explain why it is an approach that is outside those circles of core and incremental innovation, that are out in that oasis or that swamp, that space where we can deliver 10x plus returns.